Seymour Vann. I
Nickname.
lived in Jacksonville, Florida, practically all my life. And I think it was 42, I joined the Air Force because we had a chance to pick it. But if we'd have waited, we would have been, drafted.
Gotcha.
We'd have to take what they gave us. So it's about 4 of us boys, good friends. We decided we'd join, and we all did. 2 of us went overseas and it was in combat. 2 of them stayed in the States and got to be. They did a lot towards. They did a lot. They did their work at home, and so I didn't blame them for not being over there.
You were with the squadron, Jack.
Yeah, we did our flight training in Tampa, Florida, Drew Field, and that was the place where we collected our crew. And we did quite a bit of practice flying, practice bomb runs, night flying. At one time I took over the plane in the pilot seat as I think the bombardier, he had a turn at it. After we left there, we thought we was going to get a 10-day delay en route so we'd go home, but we was boarding the train in Tampa, and they had a band there to see us off, and that's when we realized we were going. We're on our way overseas, and so we went from there to Hunterfield, Georgia, and we got a brand new V089, and we made a few flights in it, and then took off for overseas. We landed in New Jersey. It was our first stop. Then from there to Bangor, Maine. Me being an engineer, I had to stay with the plane and do the pre-flights. From there we stopped over in Goose Bay, Labrador. We was taking the northern route over. So from there we went to Iceland, and from Iceland to Prestwick, Scotland. That's when they took our plane from us. We didn't exactly like that. We thought we'd have it all the way. But anyway, they sent us, some of us up to Stone, England. No, all of us. And then they separated us. The enlisted men went to a place they call the Wash up on the a big inlet between Scotland and England. We got some more combat training, shooting, and they had turrets set up along. This was a big bay out there, and it would be completely dry when the tide went out. They had awful high tides. One thing I remember, we'd be shooting at the target socks. The plane fit, pulled along, and the Scottish people would be out they'd bring big wagons, mules and wagons out into that bay, collecting oysters and other seafood. And we were shooting right over their heads. And then from there we went to our 388 base at Station 136. Why can't I think of that name?
At Nevishaw?
Yeah, Nettie Show, right.
And
Went in the barracks. They were taking some belongings to a cruise that just went down. And they said, come on in. We're going to make room for you. You can take their place. So we did. Anyway, we went 15 missions there, and they let us have some rest period up in the Highlands, and had a English, what I thought would be a mansion over here. They even gave us breakfast in bed. They had a couple of Red Cross girls there and some other girls, and had their typical English I don't know what the word is, but anyway, he saw that we got everything we needed, and he's the one that brought our breakfast in.
mhm.
And of course, in the evening, we had a big parlor, biggest fireplace I ever seen. I think it was about at least 8 feet wide. They had fire in it. It's the wintertime. And we'd meet there in the evening and have our cocktails or drink of whatever we wanted. Anyway, we had various things to do there. Target shooting with bow and arrows. Just various things. And horse riding. And that lasted about 2 weeks, I believe. And then we went back to the base to do business. And we started as lead crew then. We didn't fly as often. Because they had, a lot of lead crews. So, we flew our first mission the day after D-Day. And of course, everything that was going on D-Day was going on that second day, the 7th of June. And we went on that mission. Then to near Paris to knock out some bridges and train where the trains would marshalling yards is what they were, marshalling yards. And we had a short mission that day. Got back. I think that was the day we went on 2 missions at a time. Some went on as many as 4 missions, which was real rare. But they were short and helping out the ground crews there.
That was your first lead mission
Yeah.
flight. And how many lead missions did you fly?
15. As I recall, we may have slipped in a couple somewhere there that wasn't lead, but we were always lead or deputy lead. Sometimes a lead ship could have to be aborted, and the deputy would take the place.
Tell them about
But I can
Belgium.
tell you one thing, the German fighters and gunners who put all that flak in the sky, they were looking to get that lead crew. So it did make it some quite more dangerous. fact, the radio man we had for the first 15 missions, he copped out there. We had to get another radio man. You could always quit if you wanted to. But for most, it was harder to quit than it was to keep going. Anyway, he got on another crew that wasn't, I don't think he flew any lead missions. We had some easy runs, which you never know. When you start out on a mission, you don't know what it's going to be, but you still got the, I don't think there's anyone that went over there that didn't have a lot of fear working on him, and doing that time.
Did you ever fly to Berlin?
Yes, we had 2 missions to Berlin.
About Belgium.
The second one to Berlin, I think it's, I don't remember exactly what. It was a rough mission. We were lead crew, and we had a bomb. It didn't go out of the bomb bay, so that was my job to go in and kick it out of there.
Which was dangerous.
So I did that. I remember we were getting a lot of flack. Didn't have a parachute on. I had to take a walk around oxygen bottle so I could go in there. And that required us taking a screwdriver over to the, holding on and reaching over to the outside bomb rack and tripping that bomb out.
Is that the only time you had to do that?
That was only, yeah. One time I
They
did
couldn't
that.
land with it like that.
It was another time I had to, our landing gear didn't work right, and I had to go in and let it down manually, which was, you're in the bomb bay when you're doing that, and you have to get in a sort of awkward position. And it wasn't easy to crank that thing down. But,
Made a successful landing that time?
oh yeah. And we were lucky. But some of the groups in one particular mission, I remember, we went to Poland, Germany. And it was reported that they had jet engine factories down there when they first beginning to making their jets. Those, I think they were called 262.
262s.
Yeah. And we had seen a few of them. The thing about them was you needed to see them before they would go up and take a good altitude, and then they would cut that engine off and dive in. With the engine off, you couldn't see the contrail, so that was their way of doing it. But if you could see them before they started in, they were pretty good, easy shots. And
Did you receive credit for shooting down any aircraft?
no, never did. Hail Gunner got credit for one, I believe.
Well, did you?
We went on that trip to Poland, Germany. There was a group ahead of us, flying ahead of us in the high group. I noticed a swarm of enemy fighters about 11 o'clock out from from this group, and our fighter planes, our friendly fighters had just left us, and that was the 51s, and we were supposed to have some P-47s from Italy to pick us up at that time, but they were about 10 or 15 minutes late, and that's when the German fighters hit this group and it was in a lead ahead of us, but no friendly fighters there, and they just had their way with them for a while, and they were B-17s blowing up and balls of fire everywhere you looked up there, and it was a little scary. The fire don't look like the fire is on the ground. It's a different color. It's a sort of a bright yellow, you know, instead of orange or darker, because of the oxygen. So we went on, I remember another mission, we went to Merseburg, or in the Merseburg area. That's, they call that the Rhine Valley, where Germans had a lot of manufacturing plants. We went there, I think, to hit some synthetic oil plants. And we had been there twice before, which was rough missions. But this particular time, we were in some of the heaviest flak I ever seen, and it was right up close to high in the top turret. You observed more than you did from any other position, and it almost got to me. I'll tell you, I was some scared fella. I got down on a previous mission near Paris. I had witnessed a group was coming off of target. They were about 2 o'clock from us and high. And one of the ships got a direct hit right underneath the front of the bomb bay. And that top turret went out. The man was in it. He couldn't have a parachute in it. So that was on my mind, and this mission to Merseburg there, and I just got down out of my turret, and when I left my parachute by the escape hatch, so I got it and put it under my feet. But as I went to get it, the pilot kind of caught me. He thought, and I didn't know he thought that at that time, but later on, he reached out to get me, and so he thought I was going to get out of that plane. But I never had any idea of getting out of the plane unless it was a total had to, you know.
Yeah.
So I came on, got my parachute and put it under my feet down there. Just could have enough room on the base of that turret to put my feet.
Uh-huh. But you didn't need it.
No, didn't need it. Which I was glad I didn't need it. So that trip, though, we were shot up real bad. We had 2 engines out, and another engine was losing a lot of oil. We had Well, when we landed, we counted the holes, 247 flak holes, from small ones to some like this.
Hmm.
And we landed in Belgium, just inside of friendly territory. At the time, well,
And that was just on 2 engines then.
yeah, right. The other one, pilot thought it needed, when would it need to be feathered? Because if the oil wasn't haul out, you just couldn't feather it, and it would vibrate off there. It wouldn't windmill. But anyway, I was watching the mount that was coming over the wing of the oil. It was so cold, the oil would ball up on top of the wing as it was coming over and rolled off. And I knew that we had 35 gallons of oil in each engine, you know, in each oil tank. So I kind of judged it by that, and I would have advised him to cut it off, but we had enough time, and so we tried to land at one strip, and a B-24 came in on that strip and hit a bomb crater and wrecked, and we had to find another strip. So our navigator was on his toes. He knew where we were, and he knew what little strips they'd have. They were prompted on that before the mission, you know. And so we got to another strip and landed and made a safe landing. And from then, we some of the Belgian boys, a bunch of them come up and wanted to talk with us, kids. I don't know why they were out there by themselves, but they were. And so they were ferrying, some of the B-24s were carrying gasoline for the ground crew. They were from England. They were transporting it there, and we taught one of them back to England. Landed at a strip just north of England, of London, and from there our group sent a truck down to get us. We never did have debriefing on that mission. I often wondered why, because we had a lot to talk about. But that's essential. And that was near to the last of our mission. I think we had one more after that.
What was the name of your airplane?
Well, the pilot and they come up with a name, and it was Itty Witty Bad. At each number, each starting letter of the words, if I tell you, will you buy me a drink? So a lot of people were inquisitive, and we got a few drinks out of that. So,
And what was your bomb group
388 bomb group,
and your squadron?
562nd Squadron. We thought we had the best squadron of the 388 Corps. Then come time to go home, we made our 30 missions, and somehow or another I got on a boat, on a troop ship coming back home, all by myself, never knew a soul on it. Before I came home, we had a 3-day pass. I got in and we had just gotten paid. Some guy from New York come over to my barracks and started a little crap game there, and he won all my money. He was pretty smart. He knew how to thumb those right when they would die. Anyway, I had a 10-shilling note left. So that night I went to the Rocker Club and got in my own game. I started betting on the side. There was a few recruits had just come in, and they didn't know a little Joe from a seven. And so I got lucky there, and they bet me even money, you know. Anyway, I won quite a bit of money there, betting on the side, and then I started handling the dice myself. And I think I bought near 10 fifths of scotch there to setting all the boys up. And early in the morning, this guy had won my money in the barracks. He was there, and I broke him. I remember the last Monday I put up 100 pounds, and I said, "You guys paid this now." I said, "I got to pass. I'm going home after this." And I rolled the dice, and up 11 come there. So I won that 100 pounds. I just didn't seem like I could lose. It just didn't make any difference what I did. I won that night. Never won with much since or before.
And what were you wearing?
Huh?
You were wearing your fatigues?
Yeah, I had on pair of fatigue pants. Well, jumper. And I had pockets full of pound notes. And I got a little afraid because it wasn't quite daylight, and I had to walk to the barracks. So I was watching out real good. I got to the barracks and got behind my clothes where they hung up there, and got all that money out and counted it all up and rolled it up. So we had that 3-day pass coming. I went to my tail gunner, Basil Smith, and he had been down there that night. So he had a few drinks under his shirt, and I showed him that wad of money. I said, "Come on, we got to make this truck to go into Thetford to get on, so we can catch a train there." We had made a few trips up to boy, I'm telling you, I can't think of it very good. Anyway, we went to a town up in the Midlands. Out on the tail gunner Smith money, along the bombardier some money, Montevideo, and I think along the ball turret some money. Anyway, we went on that pass, and I had quite a good time. I won't go into one of the experiences I had there, but I didn't think about it much till years later, and I was thinking about how back on some of the trips I made, back on my life there, but I won't go into that. It was quite a story to tell.
Could you give the name of all that flew on your plane?
Yeah, I did
Can you
know.
name your crew?
Yeah, well, Gauthier, John P. Gauthier, he was our pilot, and Ralph Reese was the co-pilot. Al Weidenbush was the navigator, and Montevideo, Harry Montevideo was our bombardier, and I was the engineer, top to it. Of course, the navigator and bombardier, they were in the nose of the plane. They were gunners also. We were all gunners when we had to be, except pilot and co-pilot. Then there was a radio operator. The first one we had that came over was on our crew to start with. His name was Art Smith. He was a little difficult to deal with all along. And finally, when we made lead crew, he didn't want more of our crew. Pilot had to occasion or two to discipline him. Anyway, then John W. Dorian was one of the waist gunners. We called him Dutch. And the other waist gunner was Ray Rome. And then, of course, ball turret gunner was Gene Forti. He was the smallest guy on our crew, and also youngest. I kind of took him in tow when we were off together. And anyway, that's about the story.
There we go. Mighty fine. I certainly appreciate it. All right. Real good.
Good enough.
Now,
I'm Ralph Reese. I was co-pilot on Jack Cauthier's crew, and we belong to the 388th Bomb Group, 562nd Squadron. We flew 30 combat missions all over Europe, and we became a lead crew halfway through our missions and flew the last 15 as lead crew, since we had a bombardier who was quite accurate in his bombing records. His name was Harry Montevideo, and he was good enough that the upper echelons of the group named him as good potential for a lead bombardier. They were going to take him from our crew, but Jack informed them that as long as they were trying to take him away from us, wouldn't it be better for them to use the entire crew as a lead crew for our group? So that's what happened. We became a lead crew. We flew a lot of practice missions in between our regular missions, and we had what I consider probably one of the most successful crews in the whole European theater of operations. Our position was well known by most of the people that flew in our group, and a lot of them said that they would like very much to have Gauthier's crew in the lead anytime we flew on a tough mission. and we did fly a lot of tough ones, one of which was at the synthetic oil plant in Merseburg, Germany. We flew that mission with a great deal of apprehension because we had flown one similar to it to the same target previously, and we knew that the flak conditions were very heavy around that plant. So we flew this one and we really got clobbered over top of the missions, over top of that target, to the extent that our airplane suffered considerable damage. We lost one engine automatically over the target since the flak shorted out the feathering circuit and caused one engine to quit altogether. It feathered itself. The second engine was hit in the oil lines, and we began to pump oil out over the left wing to the extent that we knew that as soon as we ran out of oil, we would have to shut that one down, which happened rather quickly. Didn't take long to immobilize the second engine. This meant that we only had 2 engines left. As a result, we could not stay up with the formation. We didn't have enough power to stay in formation and had to drop out on the way back to our base. We knew at the time that we were not going to be able to make it back to our base, and therefore we began to unload all the equipment that we could possibly spare, such as radios, guns, ammunition, you name it. Anything that was not nailed down, we had to throw overboard just so we could remain airborne. When we realized we were not going to make it back to the base, we began to look for a place to put the airplane on the ground, and fortunately for us, we were lucky enough to pick St. Jean, Belgium as the place where we finally came to rest. And the reason we were so lucky was Patton's tank crews had secured that base just 24 hours before we had to land. And General Patton's tank crews did a wonderful job, except for cleaning up the bomb craters that were left in the runway. So we had to dodge bomb craters all the way down the runway, but at least we got down on the ground. And one of the nice things about it was we came back along the taxiway, and as we did, all the little French and Belgian kids, about 6 years old to 8 years old, were standing on the sidelines cheering and waving American flags. So that was a very touching scene, and we were just grateful to be back alive. We couldn't salvage the airplane at that point, and we had to catch a return trip to England by way of the B-24s that were bringing in gas for Patton's tanks. As a result, we got on board a gas carrier, a B-24, which took us back to England later that day, but they would not take us to our base. We had to call for someone from our base to come pick us up. So they sent us a truck to return us to base. And that was one of the longest missions we had ever put in. So that's about all that I can describe for that one mission, which was probably the scariest of any that we had flown.
Did you fly missions to Berlin?
We did fly to Berlin, and we were scheduled to fly the shuttle mission, which was going to bomb Berlin and go on to Russia, to Poltava in Russia. However, on the trip toward Berlin, we developed engine problems that caused us once again to abort that mission, and we had to turn back. So we never did get to go to Russia, but maybe that was a good omen, because the people that did go there were bombed by the Germans one night right after they landed, and they lost a lot of B-17s on the ground from the German bombing. And those crews took, I guess, several months before they could return home to the regular base in Netashall. They had to go through Tehran, and they had to cross the Alps, and they had a lot of rather tough times to make their way back on any kind of transportation they were able to get. They had to come back through Iran and Spain and Egypt, and they finally arrived back at base, but it was a very long and tedious process to get them there.
Maybe a good time for engine trouble.
It could have been, but the engine trouble was something that nobody expected, and we had a correspondent on board who was highly incensed about the fact that we had to abort the mission, because he was counting on going. And I guess fortunately for us, if you want to look at it that way, the mission turned out to be something that was better for us than we had expected. But while the rest of them were trying to find alternate transportation back home, we were still flying our missions from the base.
Did you fly D-Day missions?
We started flying on D-Day, but as I recall, it was only a practice mission, knowing that we were going to become a lead, and or hoping that we'd become a lead. But the day before the invasion, on June 5th, 1944, we were in the air for some reason, one reason or another, and I can recall seeing all the ships crossing the English Channel toward the Normandy beaches, and there were just thousands of them. I never saw so many boats in the water as I did that day. And when we came back, we watched for about 8 hours the C-47s that were towing gliders. The C-47s were dragging their gliders toward the combat zone, and they lost a lot of people that way. But we were not a part of the actual D-Day invasion. We flew the following day, the day after D-Day, on our first mission.
Do you remember where that mission went to?
I can't recall the exact one, but I think it was the exact same base that we had to land at in St. Tron, Belgium, when we were shot up so badly that we couldn't even bring our airplane back home with us.
You had to dodge your own bomb craters.
We had to dodge our own bomb craters. And there were a considerable number of them. We got to see one German fighter, an Me-109, that had veered off the runway, probably hitting one of the bomb craters, and it was lying off to one side down in a bomb crater. And we got to visualize what it was up close and personal to see what an Me-109 looked like at the engine compartment and through the cockpit. And it was very tight quarters. I looked at the skin of the airplane, which was quite heavy compared to the ones that we flew. They must have had an aluminum skin on that thing about 1/4 of an inch thick in places in the wing. So, and the glass, the bulletproof glass, was at least 1 inch thick in the cockpit. So it had some pretty rugged characteristics.
Can you tell me about when you flew as formation leader there?
When we became a formation leader and I had to relinquish my spot as co-pilot and fly in the tail, I was called the formation control officer, and I had a light gun which allowed me to flash a code of our particular group so that those that were forming on us as lead could come up through the clouds and identify our plane so they could form up and get into the proper spot in the formation. And it worked out quite well. That system replaced the one that they had when we first got over there, of having a flare released by the tail gunner, which ran out on a cable, and at the end of the cable it would hit a stop which caused it to ignite. Now this was a magnesium flare and a very, very bright light. Jack and I were watching one of those missions while we were preparing to go into combat. We were going to go on call or on pass that day, and we had just finished cleaning up to take our trip to London to go on pass when we saw our own group forming overhead, and we saw the flare being released from the tail of the airplane. The only trouble was, when it came to the stop, instead of stopping and lighting, it lit up all right, but it broke loose and came crashing down almost within 20 feet of where we had stood just moments before. So that was a pretty scary experience.
I guess so. Getting bombed by your own group.
Bombed by our own group with a flare.
What other experience would you like to share with me?
I think they're the main topics of experience that I would like to share with you, because even though we had many, many more, one of my greatest regrets is that I did not detail each and every one as much as I should have in my diary. I had a diary, and I just jotted down briefly what each one of them was, how many fighters we encountered, how the flak was, whether it was light or heavy, and that's about as much as I put down on the diary. And it took months to get that back through the mail to finally get back to my home in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And
Where was the worst flak that you saw?
the worst, I would say the one that I described, that was the Merseburg mission. And that was one of a couple of them that we had flown to that particular target. Other missions were somewhat less eventful, but they were interesting at any rate, because there was a time when we flew missions that were to supply the French underground people who were in the mountains in southern France. And we flew one mission to southern France where we released supplies to the Maquis, which was the French underground group. And these supplies all went out of the bomb bays on the V019s attached to red, white, and blue parachutes. So that was a very colorful mission. Other than that, we flew several missions to a target in Munich, Germany, and they were long missions, each of which took 11 and a half hours from takeoff to touchback, coming back home. And we did that 3 days in a row to Munich. And when you got out of the airplane, you couldn't hear anything. The noise had affected your hearing to the extent that it was like listening to somebody talk underwater. When you used your own voice, you couldn't really hear what was being said.
Do you recall what the target at Munich was?
No, I don't.
It must have been very important to go 3 in a row.
It was an important target, and they did it 3 days in succession. That's it.